Friday, man, that's a vibe right there. I belong in the 70s. That's the Soul Train line music. I am excited to be joined by co-founder of Black Voters Matter, radio host, writer, consultant, social justice activist Cliff Albright, who is doing extremely important work tracking and fighting back against the voter suppression that is being brought to you in part by Georgia Republicans and spreading across the country. Cliff, thank you so much for joining me this morning. How are you, brother?
Hey, man, I'm doing good after that little music interlude we just had there.
Hey, listen, man, all the shenanigans that is happening across this country, all the stuff that Republicans are doing, and quite frankly, the ruling elite are doing, we got to put some music in between these segments to keep us nice and balanced. That said, you are working and bringing light to the issues that are happening here in Georgia. With the voter suppression, the blatant voter suppression that's happening, as well as tracking what Congress is doing and the Democratic Party is trying to do to overcome those barriers. Just kind of contextualize for us what you're seeing and how you're fighting back against it.
Yeah, so, I know a lot of your listeners know about, obviously, what happened in Georgia back in November and then again in January in terms of both the presidential and the Senate runoff elections. Black voters came out in historic numbers, made history, shocked the country. And so in response to that, what we have is a Republican-led state house, state Senate, as well as the governor, who are trying to roll back voting rights. It's the most sweeping attack on voting rights that we've seen, not just since the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. This is the most sweeping attempt that we've seen since, you have to go back to post-Reconstruction, really, to see this level of attack, right? Over 50 bills that they introduced. The two biggest of which are right now are pending. They've already made it through one house, about to be voted on in another house that would do everything from getting rid of absentee voting, vote by mail altogether, to raising the age, to getting rid of drop boxes, to getting rid of Sunday early voting, because it's not just an attack on vote by mail. This is an attack on early voting. So they would reduce the days, get rid of Sunday, which they know is the day that a lot of Black communities and Black churches do souls to the polls. You name it, photo ID. They've rolled it all into this just kind of perfect storm of voter suppression, all under the guise of trying to stop voter fraud, which their own Republican Secretary of State said did not exist. They investigated not once, not twice, but 3 times and found no voter fraud, right? And this is a vote by mail system that they really created back in 2005, never had a problem with it, never felt that it was fraudulent because they expected their voters, Republican voters, to be the main ones to use it. So that's what's going on right here. And then we're fighting against that in a number of ways, including stuff at the state level, as well as stuff at the federal level.
And we spoke with Georgia State Representative Renita Shannon yesterday about this. And I guess the thing for me is how blatant they are. Like they don't care that this is an all-out assault on our ability to actually win elections. In fact, in some of the testimony at the federal level in the Supreme Court, one of the lawyers supporting these types of legislations that we're seeing across the country actually just admitted that this was a zero-sum game, and that if they wanted to do this so that they could help Republicans win, and it was so embarrassing that Donald Trump's appointee, Amy Coney Barrett, actually had to cut him off at the last. They are so transparent in what they're doing. My question is how is this even? How can they be so transparent and so blatant with it to the extent where it's almost like the hoods are out? And simultaneously, they're acting as if this is the reasonable, moral, and just thing for them. They're acting as if what is a criminal infringement on our rights is just and noble and worthy. Talk about that weird dichotomy that we're in.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of dynamics to it. On the one hand, it's quite simply like this is what happens with white supremacy, and particularly over the Trump years, where white supremacy was allowed to just be out in the open, right? To say the quiet thing out loud, right? Mm-hmm. That's one of the legacies of the Trump era, where if you do that, and if you do it often enough and big enough, then people can't really catch up to what you're doing, right? That's why they flooded the legislature with over 50 bills, and it's really more than that at this point. Over 50 bills are related to voter suppression, because if they're that blatant about it, and if they flood the system that much, then it's like, okay, there's nothing that you can do about it, and it's okay to be openly white supremacist when you've just had a person in the White House that has done so for 4 years. That's one dimension to it, but the other piece of it is this, and this is really important. We're very clear that this is an attack on Black folks. This is an attack on Black and brown voters, right? This is rooted in anti-Blackness. This is rooted in the same falsitous democracy that have existed since its founding, right? We're clear about that. But at the end of the day, this is about affecting democracy in an even bigger way, because part of what leads to what you just said, being able to be so blatant about it, is this. When you've done it enough, when you've suppressed enough votes, when you've gerrymandered your districts, then you've created a situation where you are completely insulated from votes. You are completely insulated from democracy. You're even insulated from your own base. That's why you have a situation right now, not just in the state, but in this entire country, where these Republicans are going against things that are wildly popular, that even people within their own base support. Minimum wage, wildly popular. The COVID bill, wildly popular. Healthcare, wildly popular. All these things, even common sense gun law, right? Wildly popular, but they are insulated from it. That's what happens when you have this voter suppression. The anti-Blackness that leads to you to create these kind of undemocratic systems eventually bounce back, and it affects the entire system. That's what's happened in this country. The Trump years have made it worse, but we're very clear that this existed before the Trump years.
That's so important. You said the anti-Blackness has a reverberating effect and comes back and it's detrimental to these white folks who support it, right? And I want to contextualize it now in terms of what people are doing to fight back, because all of this is made possible by the decision Shelby versus Holder, where now none of these states have to check with the Justice Department before they make changes to the voting systems, particularly states in the South that have a history, right? There were, I believe it was 5 states, Georgia's one of them, that had a history of voter suppression. And but prior to Shelby versus Holder, any change in the voting process had to be checked with the Justice Department. Now that's gone. We're trying to get a response in order to overcome that barrier on the federal level. Talk about HB1, HB4, but also what's happening on the state level in terms of pushing back.
Yeah, so in terms of HB1 and HR4, the For the People and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, obviously we know that HR1 was voted on the other night. And we're hoping that it gets moved in the Senate. But at the end of the day, to get moved on in the Senate, what's it going to take? You're not going to find 10 Republicans that are going to support, expanding voting rights. So what this means is, for voting rights, as well as some of these other things that we've talked about, minimum wage and other things, what it means is you've got to get rid of the filibuster. The truth is, we would have liked to have seen them act on these voting rights bills on day one. When Joe Biden was walking down Pennsylvania Avenue, shaking hands and all that stuff, he should have been on his cell phone trying to figure out and talking to Congress, talking about, okay, this is what we need to do to get these voting rights passed. Because at the end of the day, if you don't deal with the voter suppression, if you don't pass these Voting Rights Act, every other piece of the agenda, even stuff that they might actually get passed, it will be for naught, because you're going to have a system come in. You're going to have a new Congress come in. If you allow them to suppress the votes, if you allow them to continue gerrymandering, Congress is going to look very different after these midterms, not to mention 4 years from now. So this should have been day one, right? Yes, COVID has been important. We needed all of that. But if you don't act on voting rights, then everything else becomes irrelevant. So we would have liked to have seen it done sooner. But we're at where we're at right now, with the need to get rid of the filibuster. And we got to deal with, and I know you've been talking about, we got to deal with these two, I call them Manchinima, right? Manchin and Cinema, Manchinima. We got to deal with them, right? We got to find a way to hold them accountable. I'm not accepting, Joe Biden did a statement when the parliamentarians said, that we couldn't put minimum wage, and he did a statement talking about he was disappointed. I don't need you to be disappointed. You've been in DC for 47 years. The vast majority that you were in the Senate. If you ain't figure out in them 40 years how to twist some arms and cut some deals and get 2 senators to act right? If you can't figure out, that's part of the reason we put them in office. We put Joe in office for 2 reasons, right? One, because you were supposed to deliver the white vote. Didn't exactly do that because more white folks voted for Trump, right? You're supposed to deliver the white vote. And then because you had this legislative experience, so you were supposed to be able to move this stuff. Right now, you're looking 0 for 2. So we need you to do some of what Lyndon B. Johnson did. I'm not a huge LBJ cheerleader, but I'm going to be honest. What he did know how to do, he knew how to work that doggone Congress. He knew how to get some votes. He knew how to count some votes and twist them arms and cut some deals. He knew how to he had to be pushed into it, right, by the movement. But he knew how to get that Voting Rights Act passed when it came time to get it passed. That's what I need to see out of Joe Biden. That's what I need to see out of Chuck Schumer. And we got to have those 2 pieces of Voting Rights Act passed. That's the federal level. And then on the state level, our main thing is because it's a tough road. It's a heavy lift in our state legislature. But guess what? There's organized people and there's organized money, right? The corporations in this state got some organized money. What we're asking for is the folks that sit in this state, the city that was too busy to hate, we don't need you to be too busy to deal with voters' pressure. We need Coca-Cola. We need Delta. We need AT&T. We need UPS. We need these companies to take a stance against voter suppression, to take a stance in support of democracy. The same things they would do, the same lobbying, the same full force that they would use if their industry was under attack. Imagine if these bills weren't voter suppression bills, if these were anti-beverage industry bills. What would Coca-Cola do? Would they sit back talking about, ooh, we're going to take a balanced approach? No, they'd be using the full force of their money and their politics in order to squash such bills. We need them to be just as aggressive at defending democracy as they would be at defending their own businesses. What's the sense of having an office of social responsibility if you're not going to be responsible on voter suppression? Like, what's the point?
It's a lot. Look, I would sit here and listen to you all day. But in regards to voter suppression, we know that it is. You said the thing that this is built in anti-Blackness. This is rooted in anti-Blackness. And one thing about it is what a lot of people who work at the state level, who work at the federal level, whether they're Black or white, whether they're Democrat, we see how like Ben always says, all skin folk and kin folk and all people that we think who just because you're Democrat ain't going to be for what you're about. They're going to be the ones, as Renita Shannon said yesterday, Representative who was on the show yesterday, she said they're going to be the ones in the room being afraid to say the word Black people, being afraid to push out things that are going to benefit Black people because they want to make sure they keep their positions. They want to make sure they're appeasing the right. But in this time, you just read all these state and federal folks fulfilled. What is a call to action for the people on the streets for us to mobilize and organize in this particular time to help us put out the message to fight voter suppression?
Yeah, great question. I want to shout out and great job with Renita yesterday. Big fan of hers. If we could replicate folks like her and Representative Park Cannon and get that kind of courage and fierceness right in the legislature, some of this would even get squashed before it even got to this point. So shout out to her and to y'all for having her on yesterday. We're doing a couple of things, right? We've got some phone banks that are going up today. We've got some sample scripts that are going up on our website today. Our first step, I forgot to mention this, our first step was yesterday. We did a full page ad in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. That's the main newspaper here in Atlanta as well as in the state. And we're also doing ads in 20 newspapers across the state because we're not just trying to hit up Metro Atlanta. We're doing ads in places like Savannah and Macon and Columbus and Valdosta and every place in between. The full page ad, which calls out these businesses and asks them, it calls the question, where do you stand on these issues? We need you to make a statement and show up in support of Black voters and in support of this democracy. So that was phase one. Gave them a day to respond, and the response has been lukewarm at best. So we're moving into phase two, which is we've got scripts up. Our partners over at New Georgia Project Action Fund, we're also working with the NAACP on this. We've got a petition. We can send y'all the links. Y'all can post the links, but you can go to our website, blackvotersmatterfund.org, or you can check us out on social media, Black Voters MTR, like Matter, Black Voters MTR. And we'll have all these links on there where you can go Again, it's a petition form. Folks can sign up. Again, pressuring these companies to take a stance. We're doing phone calls. Anybody, not just in the state, anybody in the country can make these phone calls, right? We want their phone lines to be clogged up with folks that are calling up, doing the script, saying, we want to know where you stand. We demand that you take some action. Anybody in the country can make those phone calls. I guarantee you, if by the end of this day, if Coca-Cola's lines are all filled up, then they'll feel the pressure to take action. I guarantee you, by the end of the weekend, because Delta, your reservation lines are open 24 hours, right? On Sunday, on the weekends, guess what? This whole weekend, it's All-Star weekend too, right? The NBA is getting involved in this. All weekend, we want to be flooding these phone lines. So that's phase 2. And if they don't act right after phase 2, we got phase 3 coming, right? So those are the things that folks
stay ready.
So you can go to our website and social media to get more information about all that.
Let me phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I kind of have an idea, and just in the back of my spirit,
don't get to DEFCON 4. They don't want DEFCON 4.
Because now that I know that that there are no super spreader events outside in the streets, right? They're scientific for COVID-19. We safe taking to the streets, wearing these masks. People got vaccines. They don't want us to take it to DEFCON 4 because you're right, man. I want to emphasize what he's saying for everyone in our audience, everyone's listening to the podcast. We're going to get the links. David, if you grab the links from them, I want to share the links in the chat rooms, all the chat rooms. I need everybody to do at least 1 call. If you can do 5 calls, just help us, because at this juncture, Cliff, it sounds like we're having to make this appeal to the corporate America that benefits from Black folks here in Atlanta and in Georgia, generally speaking, because of the power dynamic in Georgia, because they're going to sign these bills into legislation. Right. They got the House, they got the State House, State Senate, and they got the governor's seat. And without pressure from the people who got the money, we're in trouble. So everybody in the audience, I want to make sure that you get these links and actively participate in it. And we're going to all participate in it until we get the results we need, even if we have to go to DEFCON 4. Cliff, give the people how they should follow you and where else you want them to go before we get out of here.
Yep. So again, they can check us out on social media, all of our social media, Twitter, IG, Facebook, Black Voters, MTR. You can follow me on Twitter as Cliff_Notes, Cliff_Notes. Again, we'll have the links to our website, to our friends over at New Georgia Project, to their website. Our friends More Than a Vote, right? LeBron James and them over at the NBA, they've got some actions as well. We'll have all of that on our social media, on our websites. There was one quick thing I wanted to also point out, because it's not just that these companies have been silent on this issue. They've actually been supporting this issue in a subtle way, in an indirect way, because many of these companies, in fact, all the companies that I've named, they've actually given millions of dollars to the very legislators that are sponsoring this voter suppression, these voter suppression tactics, right? Over the past 3 years, AT&T has given almost $100,000 to the very sponsors of these voter suppression bills. So they have actually quietly been facilitating and supporting these very same voter suppressors who, by the way, aren't just trying to suppress votes in Georgia. These were the same ones. Many of these state legislators signed on to that Texas legislation, you probably remember, where they were trying to overturn the election. Some of these legislators also signed on to that. So these are serial voter suppressors, right? This isn't an isolated incident, and these companies have been supporting them with campaign contributions for years. So they're not just quiet, they're actually complicit.
And all of this, because Black folks, brown folks, and young folks got out and turned Georgia blue, and they done lost their damn minds. And they say, never again. We can't let them Black folks dictate what happens in the state again. And so thank you so much, Cliff, for everything that you're doing, and everyone over there, Black Voters Matter, and everything. Anytime you guys need to come back on to amplify any message, just let us know.
Thank you. It's great being here, y'all. Great job.
Pleasure's ours. James, take us to a quick break. When we come back, we have another interview about why it's time for us to fight dirty. We got to fight dirty back against the people who are fighting dirty against us. We'll have more Like It or Not when we come back after this.